Today we're going to be learning about solving quadratic equations by factoring. So there's a few steps here that we need to look at to solve quadratic equations. So the first thing it says is to set the quadratic equation equal to 0, and I'm going to do number 1 following these steps. So is it set equal to 0? It is. So the next step is to factor. So again, remember factoring when you have 3 terms is A, B, and C. So we're going to draw the x, a times c goes on the top, b goes on the bottom. So we have 3 on the top, 4 on the bottom. We know 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 plus 3 is 4. And remember, because a is 1, we can just jump straight into x plus 1, x plus 3. So I can change this whole side by factoring into this, right? X plus 1 times x plus 3. And I'm going to put equal 0. So this is the new step here. You see number 3 says set each factor equal to 0 and solve each factor for x. So we have to set each of these equal to 0. So I'm just going to divide it up like this. I think it makes it a little more clean and easy to see. So you're just going to set each side equal to 0 and you're going to solve. So subtract 1 from both sides. Positive 1 minus 1 cancels out and you have x equals negative 1. And then subtract 3 from both sides. 3 minus 3 equals 0, so those cancel, and you just have x equals negative 3, because 0 minus 3 is negative 3. Now, number 4 says write your answer using curly braces. This is what this means. X equals, and then that's the curly braces. I honestly get kind of messy with this. Just make sure, I think I do it for good the first couple examples, and then I just kind of draw squiggly lines, but make sure you write it. It's supposed to be least to greatest. So that's why I put the negative 3 first, and then the negative 1, and then box your answer. So let's try number 2. So set the equation equal to 0. It's already equal to 0, so we're going to write A, B, and C. Draw the x. You guys are used to this already, right? So we have a negative 27 up here and a positive 6 down here. We know 9 times 3 is 27, but we need to make a positive 6 and a negative 27, so we're going to make the 3 negative right there. So we can write this equation then as x plus 9 and x minus 3. We're going to set it equal to 0, and then we're going to set each side equal to 0, and then solve for x. So x equals negative 9, add 3 to both sides, x equals 3, and then write it using the curvy bracket. So I put the negative 9 first because negative 9 is smaller than 3. Here a equals 1, b equals negative 10, c equals 21. Again, draw the x. You guys are used to this. So both of them in this case have to be negative. Remember, when we have a positive up here and a negative down here, both of these numbers are going to be negative because negative times negative is a positive, and then if we combine these, we keep if we add them, we keep the sign, right? And we do 7 plus 3. Okay, so now it's going to be x minus 7, x minus 3. And then you're going to divide it up. So x minus 7 equals 0, x minus 3 equals 0. So x equals 7 and x equals 3. So you're going to write it like this, 3/7, least to greatest. Okay, so try number 4. So you're going to try this on your own. Please try this, and then you should get this answer, negative 4 and 5. So when you solve it, you should get this answer. So try that one on your own. Negative 4 and 5 should be your answer. Okay, number 5. Now notice here we have 2 terms, right? The other side, 1 through 4, we had 3 terms. Now we have 2 terms. So remember, with 2 terms, the first thing you're going to look for is a GCF, and then you're going to see if it's a difference of squares. So when there's 2 terms, the very first thing, and actually when there's 3 terms, you always need to look for a GCF. But remember, if a equals 1, like it was on the last page, we don't have to check for a GCF because we know there's not going to be any. But when there's 2 terms, look for a GCF first. So there is actually a GCF, which is x. So we're going to take out x from each piece. Okay, so look what we just did. We took out an x, right? So there's 1 x left here, and there's no x's left here. So it's just x minus 8, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. Now, see how they're both in factored form? There's parentheses here, right? So we can just divide it up. Oh, first we're going to look for a difference of squares. Okay, there's not a difference of squares in here. This is not a squared term, and we can't we can't evenly divide that. So in this case, we're going to split it up and set each equal to 0. So we know for sure x equals 0. Over here, we're going to add 8 to both sides. X equals 8. So remember, we have to write it in a curvy brackets, and we're going to do 0, 8 because it's least to greatest. Number 6. First thing we do is look for a GCF because there's only 2 terms. So your GCF is 6 here. So, and we're going to have an x as well. So we're going to take out a 6x. The reason we had 6x here and not here is because there was no, see how the a is 1 and the b is -8? We can't take out a GCF of anything except for x because they both have x's in common. But here we can take out a 6 and they also both have x's in common, so it's a 6x. And we're just left with x minus 2. Okay, this is not a difference of squares left in the parentheses, so we can set this equal to 0 and that equal to 0. Now, when we solve this side, we're going to divide by 6. Remember, when 0 is on the top of a fraction, 0 over 6 just equals 0. And then on the right side, we're going to add 2, so x equals 2. So your your answer is x equals 0, 2. Okay, number 7. 4 and 81. Those do not, there's no GCF here, but there is a difference of squares, right? So 4 splits up into 2 times 2, and then remember x is x times x, so it's 2x times 2x. And then 81 is 9 times -9. And then you're going to write 2x plus 9, 2x minus 9 equals 0, and then we're going to split it up. Set each side equal to 0. Now, these you're going to get fractions, so that's okay. So watch what happens. You're going to subtract 9 from both sides, right? That's the first step. And then you're going to divide by 2. So one of your x's is -9 over 2. The other x, if you add 9, is positive 9 over 2. Okay, so it's okay that we got a fraction. And now we're going to write it in least to greatest. So -9 over 2, 9 over 2, and that's your answer. Okay, here, 9 and 49 do not have a GCF, but they're difference of squares. So 3x times 3x, 7 times -7. We can write this as 3x plus 7 and 3x minus 7. And we're going to equal it to 0, and we're going to set each side equal to 0. So the first thing we do over here is subtract 7. So we have 3x equals -7, and then we're going to divide by 3. Okay, so since I don't really have room down here, I'm just going to write it over here. So one of my x's is -7 over 3. And then if I add 7 to both sides and divide by 3, one of my x's, the answer was positive 7 over 3. Okay, so I'm going to erase a little bit of this to try number 9. So look at number 9. Is there a GCF? So when a is not 1, always check for a GCF. There is a GCF here, and it's 3. So we're going to take that out first. So all I did was divide by a 3. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. Okay, 12 divided by 3 is -4. And then we're going to set that equal to 0 and label A, B, and C. Draw the x. So we know 1 times 4 is 4, but we need to make a -4. We're going to make that a -1 so that we have 4 minus 1 equals 3. So it's going to be x minus 1, x plus 4, and don't forget to put that GCF in front. Now, look, we have 3 pieces this time. Usually we have like 2 pieces. We have this parenthesis, and we divide down the middle. But here we have this number, this parenthesis, and this parenthesis. So all of them are going to be separately equal to 0. So you have 3 equals 0, x minus 1 equals 0, and x plus 4 equals 0. Now look at 3 equals 0. Is that a true statement? No, there's no x here. 3 equals 0. We can't solve like we did up here. Do you see how it was 6x? So in order to get the x by itself, we divide by 6, so x equals 0. But there's no x here. It's just 3 equals 0, and that's not a true statement, so we're just going to ignore that piece. We don't even need that piece, because 3 can't equal 0, so we can't solve for that. But over here, we can add 1 to both sides. That cancels, so we have x equals 1, and then we can subtract 4 from both sides, so x equals negative 4. So our answer here in the curvy brackets, x equals negative 4 and 1. Okay, I want you guys to try number 10. Okay, this is what your answer should be, and remember, first please look for a GCF, and your answer should be negative 2 and 6 after you try this one. Okay, number 11. So first look for a GCF. There's no GCF here. So we're going to label A, B, and C. So now remember, the last ones we had A was always 1, right? Or we had difference of squares, or we had 2 terms. This time we have 3 terms, and we do not have a GCF, and A is greater than 1. So remember how to factor those. We're going to start off with the x the same, so negative 30 and 13. Now, this is tempting, so everyone pay attention here. You see how negative 3 times, or negative 3 and negative 10, you see how we can get a 13 from 3 and 10. But 3 plus 10, if they were both positive, make a positive 13, right? But positive 3 times positive 10 does not give us a negative 30. And so here we can't actually use 3 and 10. We're going to have to use negative 2 and 15. And I actually used 3 and 10 without checking, and then I got halfway through and I was like, wait, this doesn't make sense. So be careful here. So make sure you have negative 2 plus 15, that equals a positive 13. And when you multiply those, it's going to give you a negative 30. Okay, so remember when A is not 1, we rewrite the equation. So I just rewrote this down here, and I'm going to drop the first term. The middle term here splits up into these 2 pieces, and make sure you add an x. So negative 2x plus 15x, and then you drop the last term down. Now remember when you have 4 terms, because now you have 4 terms, to solve it, you're going to put parentheses around the first 2 and the last 2. And then you're going to take the GCF. So the GCF here, we can't take out a number, but we can take out an x, because they both have an x. These both do not have an x, but we can take out a 5. So then you write the GCF down here, and you're going to divide out an x. So you'll have 3x left here, and then negative 2x divided by x is negative 2. And then if you take out a 5, 15x divided by 5 is 3x, and negative 10 divided by 5 is negative 2. Those 2 match, so your answer is 3x minus 2 and x plus 5. But we have another step, because doesn't it equal 0? So I'm going to rewrite this up here. I just rewrote this whole thing up here. Now we can divide down the center and solve for each piece. So 3x minus 2 equals 0, x plus 5 equals 0. So add 2 to both sides, and then divide by 3. So one of your x's is 2/3, and minus 5, x equals negative 5. So your answer, remember, put smallest to largest. Negative 5 is smaller than 2/3, so you negative 5 goes first, and then 2/3, and box it. Okay, number 12, I want you to try that on your own. That's the answer you should get, negative 1/2 and 5/2. So try that one on your own. Number 13, there's no GCF here, so we're just going to label A, B, and C. Oh, and by the way, on your paper, it's a positive 5. I changed it. So please make sure, or I guess you don't have to make sure of anything, because that should be a positive 5. Okay, so 60, because you multiply 12 times 5, which is 60, and B is 32. Well, 30 times 2 is 60, and 30 plus 2 is 32. So because A is not 1, we have to rewrite the equation, drop the first term down, the middle term splits up into 30x and 2x, and the last term is 5. Put the parentheses around the first 2 and the last 2 and find the GCF. So the GCF here, well, we can take a 6 out of both of these, right? And they both have x's in common. So 6x. And here, we can't take out anything, so we just take out a 1, because they both don't have x's in common, and one's a 2 and one's a 5. So here we have 6x, we're going to drop that down, and then divide these by 6x. So we have 2x plus 5 left, and then if we take out a GCF of 1, we have 2x plus 5 left. Those 2 match, so we're going to write one of those pieces, and then 6x plus 1, and then remember it equals 0, so we have one more step. I'm going to rewrite it up here, and then I'm going to solve for each side. So I'm going to subtract 5 and then divide by 2. One of my answers is negative 5/2. I'm going to subtract 1 and then divide by 6. One of my answers is x equals negative 1/6. So put them in least to greatest. So negative 5/2 is smaller than negative 1/6. Okay, try number 14. You should get negative 2 and negative 1/3. So please try these, you guys. I'm giving you the answer so that you can try them and see how you do. Okay, last two. So this one, again, does not have a GCF. Always check that. So we're just going to label A, B, and C. 8 times 3 is 24, and we have a negative 10. Sorry, I did not write that. That's why I'm pausing here. This is supposed to be a negative 10 down there. Okay. So we're going to drop the first term, we're going to split up the middle term, and we're going to drop the last term, because a does not equal 1, so we can't just jump straight into it. GCF of the first two, well, we can take out a 2 from both of those, right? 8 and 6, we can take out a 2. We can also take out an x, because they both have an x in common. Now, look at my GCF for the next one. So you could say 1, but aren't the signs flipped here? This is a positive and this is a negative. And here, this is a negative and this is a positive. So in order for these two to match, like by the end of it, I need the signs to be the same. So I need the first term to be positive and the second term to be negative. To make this positive and this negative, instead of taking out a 1, I'm going to take out a negative 1. So, okay, 2x, and then if I divided 2x out, we have 4x minus 3. And if I take out a negative 1 here, remember negative 4 divided by negative 1 is a positive 4x. And 3 divided by negative 1 is a negative 3. So now these two match. And now I don't have to go back and change this sign, because I already took out, I thought ahead of time and I took out a negative 1. So 4x minus 3 and 2x minus 1, that equals 0. And then I'm going to divide each side and set each side equal to 0. So add 3. So 4x equals 3, and then divide by 4. So x equals 3/4. That's one of my answers. And then if I add 1 and divide by 2, x equals 1/2. So remember to write it in the curly brackets. 1/2 is smaller than 3/4, so write that one first. All right, last one. Here again, there's no GCF, so just label A, B, and C. So A times C is 36, 4 times 9. Has to add up to 12. Well, 6 times 6 is 36, and 6 plus 6 is 12. So we're going to rewrite the equation, drop the first one, split the middle two up, and drop the last one. Put parentheses. GCF here, they both go into 2 again, so we can take out a 2, and then they both have an x. And then the last two, we can take out a 3. So if we take out a 2x, we have 2x plus 3. And if we take a 3 out of the last one, we have 2x plus 3. Those two match, so we're going to take one of the matching pieces and our leftover piece, and we're going to set it equal to 0. Now, notice what you have here. Don't both of those equal each other? So see how 2x plus 3 and 2x plus 3, those are the same thing. So since these are exactly the same, so the signs are the same too. If one's 2x plus 3 and one's 2x minus 3, they're not exactly the same. But since they are exactly the same, you only need to solve one because you'll get the same answer. So I'm just going to solve one of them. So 2x equals negative 3. So here, x just equals negative 3/2. If I were to solve this one, I would also get x is negative 3/2. So I don't need to do both. I don't need to do more work than I have to. So that's your only answer in this case.